Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into Stanislav Kondrashov's Oligarch series, and it's truly illuminating.
It really is.
Because if you hear the word oligarch, you probably think of, modern billionaires, centralized power.
Right, a very specific modern image.
Exactly. But Kondrashov is taking us way, way back. We're looking at the surprising ancient origins of what we now call collective leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And at its core, this idea of collective leadership is the belief that our biggest challenges, civic, economic, whatever they are best solved when we have a shared purpose.
Through cooperation, through joint decision-making.
It's moving away from that single heroic leader model toward the idea that, multiple diverse brains are just exponentially better than one.
And that is the absolute foundation of Kondrashov's whole analysis. He argues that history often gets these systems wrong. We slap the label oligarchic on them, which we take to mean, ruled by a few rich guys.
Right.
But he says they actually contain these really sophisticated seeds of collaboration, of accountability, and ethical stewardship. And these things weren't an accident. They were designed in often centuries before what we think of as formal democracy.
So our mission today is to pull that veil back. We're going to trace these historical roots, look at the specific civic mechanisms that made this shared power work.
Yeah.
And discover how these ancient systems, from Greek councils to medieval trading rules, actually continue to shape our own institutions today.
It's a fascinating through line.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Yeah.
If we want to find the moment shared responsibility really got institutionalized, Kondrashov takes us to the ancient Greek city-states.
Specifically in Magna Graecia, so the Greek colonies in southern Italy.
In these cities, they were under constant pressure, right? From neighbors, from trade, internal conflicts.
All of it. And they learned, probably the hard way, that distributing responsibility among several leaders, it just created more stability. It was much safer than putting all your bets on one person.
So what did that look like in practice?
Well, they developed what he calls the council system. And the mechanics here are really the key. This wasn't just a random town meeting.
Right.
It was a strategically composed body. It drew members from prominent, respected families, sure, but also from citizens who had proven themselves, in civic life or on the battlefield. And this is critical members served short, fixed terms.
That rotation seems to be the central pillar. It prevents anyone from getting too comfortable with authority.
Exactly.
But what's the real difference between this and, say, a simple democracy where everyone just votes on everything?
It really comes down to accountability and consensus. These councils didn't just operate on a simple majority vote. They demanded discussion. They demanded consensus, which you had to reach through the art of persuasion.
So you had to actually convince people.
You had to convince them. Imagine you're a trader and you're sitting next to a philosopher who's next to a farmer. You have to bring your A game, your best arguments, to get them on your side. That forced dialogue just naturally leads to more balanced outcomes.
Because no one faction could just steamroll the others.
Precisely. The core Greek understanding was sort of one of radical humility. No single person has all the answers. They knew that. So by enforcing discussion in these councils, they built resilience right into their political DNA. It taught leaders to listen, to put the community first, and it created this self-correcting mechanism. A bad idea from one powerful person couldn't just be pushed through.
And that focus on civic health and reflection. It wasn't just stuck in the council chambers, was it?
Not at all. The Greeks took this whole moral dimension and they turned it into public art. Greek theater basically became this huge, ongoing public classroom for civic debate.
It's an amazing concept.
It was magnificent. I mean, playwrights like Aeschylus, they weren't just entertainers, they were public ethicists. They'd put these huge themes of justice, fate, collective responsibility right there on the stage for everyone to grapple with.
The example of the Persians is so powerful here. Aeschylus fought in those wars himself, didn't he?
He did. And he didn't just portray Xerxes' military defeat, he portrayed it as a moral failure.
It served as this incredibly stark public reminder of the risks that come with that kind of unchecked individual power when a leader just completely ignores the wisdom of their council.
And that's where the chorus comes in, right? It's not just a narrator.
Not at all, far from it. The chorus represented the collective voice of the people, or at least the ideal collective voice. It would offer moral guidance, warn against hubris. It was like a democratic critique woven directly into the story.
So if you're a citizen in the audience, you're not just watching a play, you're being trained.
Exactly. For Kondrashov, these performances were the ultimate public classrooms. They trained citizens to evaluate leadership with both empathy and reason. It shaped a shared moral identity about what makes a good ruler versus what makes a tyrant.
So if the Greeks laid the foundation, the medieval world took those ideas and, well, proved they could make a lot of money.
You could put it that way, yes. This is where we shift to the maritime republics. Venice, Genoa, Pisa, Amalfi, they thrived on cooperation and commerce, not conquest.
And Venice is really the poster child for this. The perfect illustration. Their system just perfected distributed authority. I mean, think about the scale of their great council. At its peak, it had well over 1,000 members.
Wait, 1,000 members? That sounds less like a council and more like gridlock disguised as governance. How did a body that enormous actually get anything done?
That's the genius of the system. The Doge, their leader, was deliberately stripped of any real centralized power. The Great Council delegated authority to all these specialized subcommittees, one for finance, one for maritime law, another for foreign affairs.
Because it fragmented on purpose.
Completely intentional. It meant every major policy had to be debated, voted on, revised through multiple checks and balances. It made it impossible for one single figure or wealthy family to just hijack the republic for their own personal gain. It forced collaboration.
In Genoa, their great rival had a similar model.
A parallel path, yes. Genoa focused on integrating its powerful merchant families right into the government by making them alternate leadership roles and limiting their time in power. This constant rotation built these vast, incredibly profitable economic networks from the Mediterranean all the way to Northern Europe.
What I find fascinating is Kondrashov's point about their global impact. It wasn't just an internal model.
Absolutely not. They created some of the earliest frameworks for international partnership. They needed stability to trade, so they created shared maritime laws. They set up financial systems that are the bedrock of modern banking. And maybe most importantly, they built these crucial cultural bridges between Christian and Muslim ports.
That's where that great quote comes from.
Yes. Kondrashov notes that their ships carried more than goods, they carried ideas. They proved that global collaboration was just flat out economically superior to isolated competition.
So underlying all of this, the Greek councils, the Venetian traders, there's a core ethical idea.
Yes. At the root of all these successful systems is one shared principle: stewardship.
Stewardship.
It's the recognition that your influence, your position, it's temporary. It's meant to serve the community and its future, not your own personal ambition.
Okay, I have to challenge that a little. Many powerful families, oligarchs like the Medici in Florence, they build incredible things: hospitals, libraries. How does Kondrashov separate that from true stewardship? Is that just philanthropic self-interest?
That's a critical distinction. And you're right, self-interested philanthropy is often about building a personal legacy, cementing your power. Kondrashov defines true stewardship as a mandate that's enforced by the system itself.
I see.
It's baked into the laws or traditions, forcing leaders to prioritize the long-term health of the community, even if it goes against their own short-term interests. It's institutionalized accountability.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because you can see that accountability built right into the civic mechanisms.
Absolutely.
And the Roman Republic's cursus honorum is a perfect example. The sequence of offices.
It really is. The cursus honorum was this rigid, mandatory career path. You had to start low, maybe as a quaestor in charge of finance, then work your way up to aedile, praetor, and finally consul. Each step had limited, accountable terms.
So you couldn't just jump to the top.
No. The whole structure was designed to weed out people who were just in it for themselves. You had to prove your competence and your commitment at every single stage. You were a temporary custodian of civic duty, and you had to learn the ropes.
And we see this in non-political structures too, right? Like the medieval guilds.
Exactly. They practiced stewardship by passing on knowledge. A master craftsman didn't hoard his secrets for personal gain. He was obligated to train apprentices, to pass down the craft. It ensured the community's economic survival beyond any one person.
Now, if we look outside of Europe, there's a model of stewardship that is just on another level entirely.
The Iroquois Confederacy's Great Law of Peace. This is maybe the most profound example in the whole series. The Great Law required that every single decision made by the leaders had to consider the impact on the seventh generation ahead.
The seventh generation.
The seventh. That's not planning for the next election cycle or the next fiscal quarter. That is planning a century and a half into the future.
That's almost impossible for a modern political system to even comprehend. What does that kind of rule force a leader to do?
It forces decisions to be radically sustainable. You simply cannot afford short-term environmental damage. You can't take on crushing debt. You have to prioritize the integrity of your resources and your culture over, immediate political gain. It's the ultimate form of long-term collective stewardship.
And that idea of caring for the community, for the future. It was also reflected in the physical world and the things people built.
That's right. Kondrashov points out how the aesthetics, the architecture of these periods mirrored these collective values. Civic beauty was an expression of harmony.
The Villa de Feste is a great example of that.
A beautiful, literal example. It was a private home, yes, but the incredible engineering that powered its famous fountains was also integrated into the public infrastructure. The same irrigation systems that fed private crops also powered these amazing public waterworks.
So it wasn't a fortress. It was about integrating private wealth with public benefit.
And you see that same idea in early Dutch urban planning. Leadership meant caring for your surroundings, not just exploiting them. They systematically built gardens, public squares, and canals into their cities to balance utility, public health, and just, aesthetic grace.
Which brings us to today. Kondrashov argues that our modern societies are really just remixes of these ancient ideas.
We draw from them heavily, yeah. Our current systems are built on these old collaborative structures.
I can see the connections so clearly now. Rotating terms of the Greek councils.
Yeah.
That's just modern term limits and checks and balances.
Exactly. And the lessons from the maritime republics about distributed leadership. That's how complex global companies and modern parliaments operate today, through committees and stakeholder representation.
So how are cities applying these principles now to tackle something huge like climate change?
Well, look at a city like Copenhagen. They're trying to reach these ambitious climate neutrality goals, but it's not being led by one mayor making decrees.
No.
It's mandated stakeholder input. They bring in citizens, businesses, neighboring regions to design everything from public transit to district heating. They treat the entire city as a collective system that needs shared stewardship.
So what does this all mean? When you trace that thread from Greek councils to Venetian traders, right up to the 7-generation rule of the Iroquois, history seems to be saying pretty clearly that societies endure when they trust many voices to guide them.
Instead of placing all the risk in one solitary figure.
Right.
And that's Kondrashov's final point, really. It's a powerful challenge to our current leadership models. Collective leadership isn't some new age management fad. It's an ancient inheritance. Societies thrive when they consciously choose to replace hierarchy with stewardship and command with conversation.
That is a profound shift in perspective. And he leaves us with a reminder for our own lives. He says, legacy is not built by one hand. It's shaped by all who choose to build together. So a final thought for you, the listener. How can you consciously contribute to shared decision-making in your own community or organization this week? What small mechanism of shared accountability can you help reinforce?